Hello, my name is Carol Mae Whittick, spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality, and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words in these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest this week is Elizabeth Kipp, a stress management and historical trauma specialist who uses trauma-trained and yoga-informed addiction recovery coaching, ancestral clearing, compassionate inquiry, and yoga to help people with their healing. Elizabeth healed from over 40 years of chronic pain, including anxiety, panic attacks, and addiction. She now works to help others achieve the same healing for themselves that she experienced directly from the work she teaches. She's the best-selling author of The Way Through Chronic Pain, Tools to Reclaim Your Healing Power. During this episode, Elizabeth shares a powerful technique to release that which no longer serves us. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
When I can be fully present in the present moment, sitting right here, not letting the mind slip into the past or the future, but being right here. Yep.
Thank you very much. And before we get deeper into the conversation, Elizabeth, I just want to give you an opportunity to just share a little bit about your story, your journey, and how has life created you into the person that's doing the work that you're doing now?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I came into a family. My mother was bipolar. They didn't know what bipolar was back then. She had a lot of pain in her back. She was athletic. She was a golfer, but she was an amateur competitor. But she was always bent over in the evening, and she used alcohol to numb that pain. And her personality was it was very unpredictable. So she was lots of fun, and then she was no fun at all. And as a child, that created a lot of uncertainty in me. And I had to learn to suppress my emotions for fear of, it was kind of like walking around on eggshells. It's like, so that kind of set up a frequency, if you will, an energetic frequency of, in my nervous system of always being on alert for when I was getting in trouble, when things were going to go sour, when I wasn't going to feel safer, things like that. That's actually a recipe for a chronic pain. And chronic pain is any pain that's felt 15 days out of 30 for 3 months or more. Any pain, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, any of it, it all sends the same signal to the brain. It hurts. So the brain can't tell the difference between one kind of pain and another. A broken heart and a broken bone, it's all the same. So it set me up. And then I had an accident when I was 14 and broke the fifth lumbar in my spine, front to back, and the front part of it slipped forward. And it hurt. And we didn't get an x-ray of it for 14 years. I was so used to a level of chronic pain that when I actually broke a bone, I didn't realize that I had done any damage. I knew it hurt, but it just didn't register, right? So that's also interesting. Mm. And then I was put on, I had to have surgery 14 years later because that a slip of that front part of the bone became unstable, and the doctors were concerned that it would slip all the way and I would lose my ability to walk. So it took 4 surgeries, and we finally got it stabilized. But in the meantime, my chronic pain got worse. And the only answer that they had was, for me, for handling the pain was opiates and any anxiety medication. Mm. And I was on that for 32 years. And the interesting thing is that was their only answer. And until I found the doctor who actually understood chronic pain. And I had an awakening in that time because I had a science background and I understood this, kind of the limits, the setup, the framework of science. And the doctors were telling me that I would never get better and that I would be in a certain level of pain for the rest of my life, 24/7. I'd be in a wheelchair when I was 40. And I was devastated by that. But after I had a chance to let it kind of settle, I realized that they had really forgotten their science, that science is about probabilities, not facts. Mm. And they could have said you, or the odds are, but they didn't. They said you will, right? And the other thing that they had forgotten was where we heal, right? We live in the all it is. We heal in the all it is, not just in the part that science can observe, measure, and describe, because the science lives in the framework that it's set up for itself. It can only comment on that which it can observe, measure, and describe. But we heal and live in the all that is, not just in the part that science has set. So I knew I would have to look outside of that model because they didn't have an answer. And so that was a saving grace for me, because I knew there was an answer. I just didn't know what it was. So I knew to keep looking. Yeah. And that was a beautiful awakening for me. Also, I'd had some experiences in my life where I just didn't even understand how I survived. So I had a sense of being held by grace, by this unseen force. And that is really what, plus I came in with an attitude like this. I came in with the gift of gratitude. And those things really helped buoy me on my journey. I finally healed about 10 years ago. I found this doctor who really understood the nature of chronic pain and how to heal it. Opiates and benzodiazepines do not heal the changes that happen in the brain. So he knew how to heal it, and he brought those. He taught me how to do that and showed me how to guided me to heal myself. And part of the work was the ancestral clearing work, which I do now. Was part of it. It was a holistic program, really, that he had. A piece of it was the ancestral work. And when I got out of that program, I'd heard from so many, I've sat in front of thousands of chronic pain patients over the years, in my own journey. And there's a lot of people out there that think you can't heal from chronic pain. And I healed, and I wasn't the only one in his program. He had a 94% success rate. So I was like, when I got out of that pain management program, I was like, I'm going to spread the word. And so I teach his methods. He passed away. Dr. Peter Prescott passed away in 2016. But he left a book, and I learned I'm not a doctor, but I'm a great coach in the space, very good support for other people that are having that kind of journey. And also, when we heal from chronic pain, whatever the chronic pain is, it might be a grief experience, it might be a betrayal experience, it might be a physical, whatever it is, we actually then have the space to actually awaken.
So much of what you said, we didn't even really discuss it. I know we didn't discuss this when we were having a chat before recording. Something that we have in common is the experience of being daughters of bipolar mothers. So I really understand. So I really understand when you said that. I'm like, oh my God, I know, because it's such, like my mum passed 7 years ago now. And but from her diagnosis, and back in the day, it was called many different things. Over the years, I've seen it called schizophrenia, manic depression, the blues. Then bipolar, I think, was the most recent definition of it, which was news to me. When that came, I'm like, oh, have you rebranded this now? And there were like a few different things in between. And especially when it became bipolar, when it had this new branding behind it of bipolar, it seemed it was more acceptable. I'll use that, to speak about it in public, because me growing up, it's like, you just didn't talk about this stuff.
Of
in
course.
the same way, prior to that, you didn't speak about cancer. There was a period of time that you didn't mention that in public when I was growing up. And it was the first 44 years of my life that I lived with my mother going through that. So all of the things that you're saying about having that feeling of just not knowing what you're walking into, or where, when up's going to be up or when down's going to be down. And the thing is, the ups are like super high, so they can be quite overwhelming, and the downs are really low, and you're left feeling completely, useless. But also what you said with that I heard as well, and that kind of like resonated with me, was being held by grace. Because for some reason, in the midst of all of that, and having gone through that for decades and decades, and seeing the way that the medical industry treat people who have that diagnosis, you go up and down, you go through all of the things, and you go up and down, and you get to a point where my experience, I got to a point where I had to detach in order to just kind of keep myself in one space. Otherwise, I'd be thrown up and down, and that was not really helpful, but, I'm still working through that. But there was always this knowing of something else taking hold of me, that I realized that kind of kept me. And also with my creativity and having that connection through being a creative and writing and singing and doing all the musical stuff, I knew about that. So in the midst of all this kind of maelstrom of up and down and people's emotions and not knowing what's going on, there was that holding in the middle, that I just had a real kind of faith and believing, and also faith and belief that I would be okay. And then what you said about when you heal that chronic pain, then it opens up the room for your awakening. There's so much that you've said in those few moments that have got me like, where do I start with this conversation? But I just wanted to acknowledge that I heard that I heard so much that kind of like correlated with my own life experience. One thing I'd like to ask you as well, when it relates to bipolar, I don't know if you've ever thought about this deeply, or you've come across anyone's thoughts on this or brought your own, is what are your beliefs about what mental illness is, having been a witness to it in your home? I know what I've got my thoughts about it, and they don't necessarily correlate with what the medical industry is telling me. But when you're up close and personally seeing someone on day to day, minute by minute, second by second, going through their own journey, you come up with different things, and it's not very many people that you can speak to about that, because they just want to go the medical route. But as a woman who has experienced so much and healed so much, where have you come to with it?
Yes, I love that question. It's really fundamental. My conclusion is that bipolar is actually a response to unresolved trauma. It's a way of, it's a strategy that we use to keep ourselves safe. And I asked myself, I knew that my mom was carrying pain, and I knew that her pain, her mother was killed in when her ship was torpedoed in the Second World War. She was at a passenger ship, and it was torpedoed by the Germans in the Second World War. And she lost her mom, and she really never got over it, and we could never talk about it. And I just don't know what else happened to her, but that was devastating for her. And she just, I felt so bad for my mom, because she just didn't know what to do with any of that. I had some genetic work done about 10 years ago. And when the doctor gave me the results, he got about 30 seconds into his report, and I stopped him. I said, "Oh my God, my mother never had a shot coming out of the womb. She just didn't have the tools. They didn't have that kind of information." And And like she didn't have a liver that could handle alcohol, for instance, and she died approximately of alcoholism, and there were other markers, estrogen issues and things like that were. It's like that came from my mom had that, and my mom had that. Well, we have tools for a lot of this stuff today. They didn't have genetic tests back there, and they didn't have ways to adjust for these genetic differences. And my mom just got by her wits. We have tools, right? So I started working not only as I was healing my own trauma, but I got into trauma. I got trauma trained. And so I got into the research. And when you look at the DSM-5 now, which is the diagnostic manual that doctors use in the Western world to give you a category, Bessel van der Kolk and the trauma, really the trauma people that work in the trauma researchers now are saying that most of those things, a lot of those things are really based on the cause of the problem, of the dis-ease, is unresolved trauma. Mm. So, and it made so much sense to me when I was in that work. I was like, oh, yeah, she not only had, some genetic disadvantages, but she also had these environmental epigenetic disadvantages. Then she just didn't have the tools to help her cope in the world. I don't know if that tracks with your experience, but it made sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, like I've thought about it from like you, as you do when you're kind of just contemplating your life and your experiences, and then especially after someone's passing, then when you don't have the when you're not worrying about them on a physical level, you realize they're passed and they're free. So you can actually contemplate things in a space that you don't have the opportunity to do so when they're alive. This is how I felt anyway.
Sure.
And that I would be able to then reconcile it and then reconcile our relationship once she passed. Because when she was here, she kept going and really kind of worked hard despite being, medically treated for so long, and don't let me get on that soapbox because that'll take up way too much time. But I thought about what were the things. I'm like, when did this actually start in her life? Because she had a number of things that happened very in a cluster. And I've spoken to other people about this, where it was, someone used the word constellation with me, that she had a constellation of events. So within the period of about, I would say, a year, 2 years, her, like my father and her had lost a lot of money that it got taken from them. They trusted it to someone and it disappeared. They'd sent it to a place where they were building a home, so it was for their future, and that got taken, and that future, kind of that timeline, got taken away from them because they lost, and this was the 70s, so it was a big amount of money, and they were working people, and it'd taken them a long time to actually cultivate that. On top of that, after the birth of my brother, she had postpartum depression as well, and then a year after that, my dad passed suddenly. So suddenly you have all these three things, and you can see where the trauma comes from. But what I always wanted to think of, like, there are other people that go through similar things, similar kind of like piling on of traumatic events, and yet somehow they manage to get on with life. So was this and whatever that means, but was that solely just those three experiences, which one on their own are traumatic, or was there a prior, was there something that was going on before, which I've never really found out about, but, just casting an eye across the family, there is something there. There's a story that no one's talking about that is very evident in the behavior and the expression of the matriarchal line in my family, because there are similarities, and some of them are diagnosed and some of them were not. So you kind of see, so there's some sort of ancestral thing from that level, but then it's wondering how far back does it go, because then there are others who almost think that it's their fate. So I've seen members of my family just assume that that's going to happen to them, and manifested that event happening just because they're like, well, this is our line. And then also, and I believed that for a while until I realized that no, that was not the case. And I wasn't crazy. I was just different. I saw the world differently. And when you come from that weight and you're doing things differently, people are going to say you're crazy, especially when you're going so far off. So I'm wondering as well whether that comes, you know, how far ancestrally that goes, but also with you talking about the ancestral healing is, you know, clearly the onus is on me to clean that up because I have the awareness. So for me to heal that within myself will also liberate the lines behind me and going forward as well. So yeah, if you can speak to that and talk about methods that you use to deal with that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a very interesting questions that you're asking. My mother went into a deep postpartum depression after she had me, and she went away for 9 months. So I was put in, you know, anyway. So it was a big separation, which didn't help either one of us. But her father and her 3 half brothers all had bipolar disorder.
Right.
And we're not sure exactly what happened to my great-grandmother's, my grandfather's mother, but we know that she had a mental illness. So we can track something back that many generations in my line. And I remember being a child and knowing my uncles and my grandfather and my mother and their behaviors, and wondering, is it going to happen to me and my brother and I? And bipolar disorder, or manic depression is what it was called back then. Will show up in early adulthood. That was a thing that I learned a long time ago. I don't know what the current data is, but I remember that was like when everybody saw it. And so my brother and I come into early adulthood and we're like, because we didn't know, we didn't understand the underpinnings, and neither one of us had it. And we're both in recovery from addiction, but that's a different story. But also, just by the way, I don't know anyone that's in recovery from addiction that didn't have chronic pain first, and I don't know anyone that had chronic pain that didn't have unresolved trauma in their system first. So you see, it all goes back to stuff happening to us and not being able to resolve it in the moment. When we come in with a frequency of like a predisposition, you could say it right. You could say that we have a predisposition for being susceptible to certain diseases, and it's up to what's happening in the environment as to whether, and science would say that epigenetically, it depends on what's happening in the environment as to whether it actually shows up in my life. But the predisposition, that's the energy that comes in through the line. Also, you said something else about, I don't remember exactly what you said, but it made me think of this. When we think of the individual healing, it's really important to do it in terms of the collective that they're living in, the culture that they're living in, right? There's no separation. We're all part of this one energetic. And in terms of the ancestral landscape, relative to the present moment, quantum physics tells us that we have access to the past, present, and future all at once in the present moment. Right. So from an ancestral point of view, in this present moment, we're actually experiencing all the energies of our ancestors in our bones right here. And we can affect by how we live and how we heal, and we can affect the future because we're adjusting to, we're deciding what the new normal is. our reaction. We're deciding we have the tools to clear trauma now. That's actually called, there's a term that was coined in 1980 by a gentleman. It's called a transitional character. And that's a person who actually breaks the pattern of the lineage. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah. It's I've always wondered, like, what, you know, being that rule breaker, but like in the same way that you said that it felt like, you know, there was something that was going to drop out of the sky and that would be the end of it. Because I truly, well, I believed it because I believed in the genetic idea. And it was told to me all the time, because there were so many names of people that I never met, aunts in Jamaica and things like that, who had, you know, gone crazy, or was this one or that one, or committed suicide, and all these things that was spoken over us, you know, that were, well, you know, it's a matter of time. So you could see that everyone was almost like waiting for Carol to lose her mind. So didn't happen, or maybe it did, you know, whichever way you want to look at things. But also when it, another thing that I would think about when it came to like mental illness and what mental illness could be or maybe would be what that person was actually seeing, you know, especially when I'd see and go and have to be on psychiatric wards. You know, you see all different levels of mania and consciousness and expression. A lot of the people are, you know, drugged to the eyeballs, really, and not really clear about where they are. But you know, things would pop up to me and go, well, are these people all really mad? You know, there was a part of me that just couldn't believe that, because even in moments of my mother's mania, she made the most amazing art. She'd draw the whole body with the organs in, you know, 6-foot tall murals. She would like read and write and crochet in massive blankets and things like that. So there was this level of this channel of energy that was coming through that wasn't destructive, and definitely wasn't the perceived idea that the media like to push of crazy, mentally ill people. They were very rare, as in my experience, people that channeled it through violence. They were just like, it was almost like they, like I said, they'd removed themselves from our existence or our level of reality or our dimension, or whichever way you want to do it, and be in some sort of separate world, seeing other things. You know, when people would be walking around and having visions and talking about them, to them they're very real. And, you know, but we'd be like, oh, they're crazy, they're seeing things. But like nowadays, we're all about visualization and meditation, seeing things, and we are more accepting of people seeing things. So where's the difference between me sitting and visioning something and bringing it into the world, and a so-called crazy person talking about something that they're seeing? Why is that not real? You know, so that was always my question, that I think there is some spiritual aspect to what we consider to be a mental illness. And also they're tapping into an energy and an awareness that is probably purer than what we're looking at in this kind of very dense reality that we live in. Those were my thoughts on it. I don't know if your mind ever went there when you're trying to like muster up what's going on in my family and all these things.
Sure. I actually feel like, because I do yoga, I'm a yoga teacher and I have a practice, and that's a very interesting practice, because it takes you into, you shift your consciousness. And so you live in these, you experience these different states of consciousness. The idea, though, and as a practicing yogi, is to not attach to any of them. You're just experiencing whatever's happening now is what's happening, and you kind of stay here, and the landscape changes. Dr. Gabor Mate recently wrote or published a book called The Myth of Normal. And I think you and I are talking around that.
Oh, right.
Because what we consider normal, we in the Western world consider normal, is relative. Right? And who made that ruler? Like, who decided what that was?
Yeah.
I mean, look at people on the autism spectrum and how genius they can be.
Mm-hmm.
Their nervous systems are operating at a different frequency than ours. They're a lot more sensitive. I've got you've got a whole spectrum there. Some are more sensitive than others, and it's kind of like a bell-shaped curve even on the autism spectrum, but they're all very, very sensitive to the environment.
Mm.
Well, they're not crazy. They're just seeing the world. Not about seeing. They're experiencing the world at a different frequency.
Mm.
So it's kind of like, what was it? Was it Aldous Huxley who wrote Doors of Perception? Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, what door are you looking through? So it's all relative, and I think you're right. I think nowadays there's a much greater understanding and of the variation within the population, and also an understanding, at least in this from the spiritual aspect, that we're evolutionary creatures. So we're always evolving from when we were little to even until we die. We're continually evolving. Well, what does that mean? That means that our where our level of consciousness is changing. It's just changing. So, that means that we're perceiving the world differently each time we have a shift in consciousness. Mm. And that doesn't have to be scary or threatening. It just is. Mm. You see?
Yeah.
So what meaning are we making of all that stuff?
And you used the word normal, and that word was like forced on us over the past 3 years, of this new normal. And it just felt like, well, what I wanted to ask of you is, because especially you were talking about trauma and chronic pain, and that chronic pain is something that is held 15 days out of 30. Well, the world in itself had at least 2 years, if not 3, of trauma, and it was relentless, really, unless you managed to kind of escape the media or anything like that. But the trauma then got brought into people's homes, and differences of opinion as to what people should do with regards to what's happening. And the trauma was ongoing, and still there are the after effects of that are still lingering in terms of people have unresolved relationships or are still dealing with the effects of what they were infected with, or what they took for the infection. There's so many different layers of trauma that has happened and that through that. But then to go back to what you said as well, was that when we kind of heal that, then it opens up for awakening. And it's interesting that you said that, especially when so many people who are seeing that whole period of time as something very different, as a shift in consciousness anyway. For those who are aware that, it's a traumatic, terrible thing that's happening, but if you kind of pull back and kind of view it from a different aspect, this is going to shape us and change us and evolve us, depending on which way you want to look at it. It's how the majority of people don't think about things in this way. Not to say anything's right or wrong, but we'll just get on to back to normal, as it were. And most people's back to normal is to stifle their pain and their trauma by using all the things that are in the world to make sure that we do that. Media, television, food, sex, social media, all of these things that will just kind of pull you away from that pain, so that you forget that the last 3 years happened and you went through that, and we all went through that, because it was inescapable. It was, you couldn't walk to a shop without seeing it happening. Something's happening in the world that is totally unusual. It's like, how are you seeing that affect the populace, the general populace who doesn't deal with healing, doesn't deal with their trauma, just goes about wanting their lives to get back to normal and have a normal life and do normal things? But you can tell that people are impacted by it. What are your thoughts on what the effects of that are going to be moving forward?
Yeah, a lot of suffering. If we're having an argument with what is in this moment and trying to get back to something that, was back then we're not here and we're going to suffer. But I just said kind of the short answer. But I would like to speak to another point that you talked about. We've been through this before. And an example is the plague in the Dark Ages, the plague, which were like 3/4 of Europe was killed, died in the plague. And what happened after that? The Renaissance. So you see, we've had, that's just one of probably many examples of the level of consciousness. We go from difficulty and we go through an evolution. And we had a great Renaissance. All kinds of new things happen. So that's really this kind of an example of the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. Right? It's just, I think we're headed into a period of rebirth, and people that are holding on for dear life for things the way they used to be. Good luck with that. I send, everyone gets a blessing from me. But to me, it's kind of like if I'm trying to get back to what I had, 3 years ago, I'm here now. So I don't want to suffer. I would like to just what do I have? I have this moment and I have this to work with, and that's where I am. But that takes a certain level of consciousness and awareness to even know that that's possible, right? If that makes sense. So it's kind of like how aware are the people that you're speaking to is the culture. So again, we have the individual who's operating in the collective, but you can't operate in the collective as an individual without taking the collective into account, right? We're affected. We can't separate the individual from the collective. We're all feeling that energy. And the way I kind of see it is, I feel like I'm responsible for my part of my part of consciousness. What am I putting out into the field? Am I putting out a lot of energy? I don't like this. I want to get back to where I was. Or am I putting, what's happening in this moment? Is there, what's the gift here? There's a big difference in those two things.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I don't even know if there's an answer to that question. It's just me seeing, that knowing how traumatized people were by certain things or angry about certain things that that then have not really found an outlet, it seems, for that. And especially if you have an awareness of being able to notice when people are carrying things that maybe they don't even realize that they're carrying, when you can see how it's kind of, they've managed to tuck it away somewhere, but it's still leaking out. You could, like, it comes out in their words or their actions, or you can see it on their face. They probably wouldn't even notice, but you can sense a difference in awareness. And then the people that are still in fear that we're, so you still see them. Sometimes there's a visual representation of that because, they're still wearing masks or the gloves or anything like that, or they're just holding it in their bodies. And but like you said, it's not the first time that we've had these cycles, and it's almost like in the harshest of ways, it would seem for us, because we always want to hold on to life, that nature just kind of shakes the rug a little bit, and just has this kind of like you say, this purification period.
Yeah, there's also, I'll take you into a whole other perspective on this.
Sure.
As an evolutionary biologist. So that lungful of air that you just breathed in, and the people listening to this, take one of those atoms of oxygen. How many different creatures do you think that oxygen atom has been in since its inception? And it was born in a sun to begin with. So it's gone through a lot of transformation. So, from one perspective, we are in this body. This in this current iteration of the energy that I'm carrying, this is the way it's showing up. But when I die, it will pass on, it will transform into something else. And then that'll transform into something else. And it'll just continue. We are continually in transformation. It's just kind of a matter of like, oh, do we realize that? Right? To me, that's a very comforting. I know it might be scary to some people, but to me, that put things in a context for me, and it helped me. It helped me feel a little bit more part of the world, so I don't feel so separate in that context, in that landscape. And one of the really important parts of healing is being able to feel this sense of connection.
Right.
Yeah. So part of the suffering that we experienced in the pandemic was the sense of isolation and separation. So what we're seeing is people grappling with that issue. I feel they're grappling with that. If their nervous system's dysregulated, they're also dealing with that. So that's a couple of things. The fear will put you into, the whole nervous system will get, hypervigilant and stressed out. And the stress response will get off of balance. And then we're off to the races into chronic pain again.
Yeah. The isolation part was, it was interesting how people managed the isolation, because, for some people it was a beautiful moment to get away from the stress of their life and to like kind of re-regulate their nervous system, especially if they had a very stressful job that they were going to that they didn't necessarily enjoy. And then to have the opportunity to pull back from that. And even for people who still had to work but were able to work from home, it kind of opened up a new possibility in their mind, because obviously you go to work and there's only that way that you can actually create a living for yourself. But it showed that different things were possible. And it would be interesting, I don't know how we'd ever find out, is how many people really opened up to their internal worlds through that. I feel that the people that fared better were able to, whether they were thinking that they were going on a spiritual journey or having a spiritual awakening, were having one, because they were just sitting at home going, actually, it's not so bad here. And, getting to know their spouse, who they probably walked past as ships in the night for the past 5-10 years or whatever, as they both kind of got on with the world stuff. But then were able to kind of sit and contemplate and face themselves and ask questions of themselves without having to kind of just be busy all the time. But then the people who really had a hard time with it hadn't forged that idea of that connection, hadn't, as you said in the beginning, known about grace and known that was there, if you needed to call it something, then it was like, here I am, I'm alone with myself, with my own thoughts, and as well as that, not only am I trapped here in my home, but there's this thing out there as well. That's a hard place to be, really. It's difficult to and this is kind of going back to kind of trying to communicate with someone who is in the middle of either their mania or depression, trying to show somebody that there is a different reality to the one that they're sitting in.
Yes, another possibility.
There's that, where they are, where they're not able to speak to you, or where they're seeing all the things that they're seeing, that where you are is just as real as where they are.
Yeah, part of healing trauma is making sure that the person that you're working with realizes that they have an option. There's not just this thing. They always have an option to withdraw, to go a different way. You want to make sure that they feel, otherwise, you don't want to have them feeling like they're pinned against the wall, because then they're back in resistance again, trying to struggle, trying to survive, doing whatever they can, pulling on whatever strategy, however unhealthy, to deal with, I got to get safe somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
And what ways, if you've encountered this over the years with clients and who've come to you, or people that have come to you, how do you offer that to them in a way that they can at least hear you and consider it? And maybe, if you can speak on that a little bit.
Sure. Well, just a simple example would be, I teach trauma-informed yoga, and people come to yoga class and one of the first things I say is, this is, we're not trying to get anywhere. We're not trying to push through anything. We're not trying to reach anything in particular. You're here with you, and I'm here to guide you into a practice that, will help regulate your nervous system, and don't let the yoga teacher hurt you. This is your practice. If there's something if there's a movement that I'm doing that you don't feel comfortable with, you can sit still, and or you can modify it if you want to, and this is how you modify it, right? So they always have an option. And what's interesting about that particular approach is, they always have an option, so they have agency. Because in trauma, you don't. You're just stuck in the experience. So healing from trauma, you want to have agency. The other part of that is the brain has difficulty telling the difference between actually doing something and imagining doing something. So even if you're in a yoga class and you can't do the movement, you can imagine doing the movement, and because of the way the brain works, the body you still get the benefit. You still get a benefit of by imagining. So there's all kinds of ways that you can provide an option for people. The idea is, when you're working with somebody in that space, the idea there is to remember part of the work is providing an option. Mm. Give them the power, because in the trauma experience, they didn't have power. So you want to make sure that you're showing them they have the power and they have the choice. And that right there is healing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. Thank you. I just want to talk a little bit more about the ancestral healing that you're doing as well. What shape and form is that taking?
Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
where are you finding the majority of your work? Is there like a kind of like an area where it seems to be more concentrated at the moment?
Well, during the pandemic, it was amazing how many clients came to me that had issues around the Spanish flu, or the plague, the previous plagues, or there were even there were quite a number of people that came to me that were descendants of the Holocaust. It was just interesting. There was like this concentration of people that had collective trauma in their past around really significant events. So that was interesting. Also, we work there's some of some general kinds of kind of categories, people that come in with guilt, feeling guilt that they feel like it's more than they really, that's theirs. They might have shame, resentment, maybe an old vendetta in the family that never got resolved, that kind of comes in as energy. Rejection, abandonment, sexual hurts and wrongs, of course, and any kind of disconnection. So this concept of our feeling of being separate is such a separate and disconnected from other people is such a source of pain and trauma. The work, there are 5 different techniques in ancestral clearing, which is a registered and trademarked modality of John Newton of Health Beyond Belief. I'm one of his practitioners. He teaches people how to do this, but he's the only one on the planet that teaches this, so it's kind of unique to him. About 80% of the work is based on what we call forgiveness, and before everybody turns away from that, they think, oh, I know what forgiveness is. We use that word meaning that we're offering up that which no longer serves us. We're offering up that something we're carrying that no longer serves us. So we use that word forgive. And we, in the practice, it's actually this one technique, one of the 5 techniques I'll share with you, is in the form of a prayer. And we address infinite creator, great spirit, Holy Father, God, whatever you want to call the energy that created all of creation, right? Whatever you want to call that. We're asking that to help us release that which no longer serves us. We're not asking it to release it. We're asking it to help us release it. You see, there's a little difference there, but it's important. Yeah. So if that's okay, it'll take me maybe 2 or 3 minutes to take you through an experience of it. Would that be okay?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So if everyone listening to this could just notice what sensations are arising for you in the body right now. Breathe normally and let these words just pass over you. Infinite creator, source of all that is, was, and ever will be. We ask humbly and gratefully that you help everyone listening to this and all of their relationships, all of their ancestors and all of their relationships, through all time, space, dimension, lives, lifetimes, and incarnations. For all the times they felt like let down by life, by family members, by relationships, by anyone representing the Creator. For any time they felt let down by the Creator in any name or form, or for any time they turned their back on the Creator, or believed the Creator turned its back on them. Please help them all to forgive and release one another and forgive and release themselves. Please and thank you. For all times you weren't nurtured, loved, supported, and cherished. Please help all of you to forgive each other and forgive yourselves. For the times you didn't nurture, love, and support others in the ways they needed. For any time you were out of integrity with one another or another out of integrity with you. Please help all of you to forgive and release one another, forgive and release yourselves for the highest good. Please and thank you. For all war, battle, holocaust, genocide, persecution, slavery, injustice of any kind, any oppression, misuse of power, position, authority, politically, spiritually, medically, or in any other way. For any misuse of the power of the word. Please help everyone involved to forgive each other, forgive yourselves now and forever. Please and thank you. For all hurts and wrongs, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, through thought, word, or action. All of you to another and another to all of you. Please help you all forgive each other, forgive yourselves for the highest good. Please and thank you. For all suicide, incest, murder, rape, abortion, infidelity, miscarriage, all of it. Everyone involved directly or indirectly. For all that happened and all you made it mean. Please help all of you forgive each other, forgive yourselves for the highest good. Please and thank you. For all hurts and wrongs to the earth and the life of the earth, Native, Indigenous, First Nation, Aboriginal people. Please help all of you to forgive each other and forgive yourselves. Be at peace with one another and at peace with yourselves. Please and thank you. For any time you believed, felt, or were shown you weren't enough. For the times you tried to earn or learn your way into the value of your family, your relationships, or the grace and love of the Creator. For all that led up to this, please help all of you to forgive each other and forgive yourselves. Be at peace with one another and at peace with yourselves. Please and thank you. For all empathic hurts and wrongs, times you took on others' unresolved issues, carried or shouldered their burdens. For all adversity, struggle, and hardship you saw, especially as children. Please help all of you to forgive each other, forgive yourselves, all family members, relationships, times this was done to you, times you did this to others. Please and thank you, Infinite Creator, all that you are. Please and thank you. For the times you weren't shown or encouraged to stand up, speak up, and do things your way. For the times you didn't feel safe to say no when appropriate. Please help all of you to forgive your parents and family members and relationships and help them all forgive you and help you all forgive yourselves. Please and thank you. For all hurts and wrongs, anything we could have inferred had it served the highest good, we infer it now. For all that happened and all you made it mean, everything that led up to, hurts, wrongs, limitation, burden of any kind that's not serving the highest good. We ask all of you, everyone involved, to forgive your parents, grandparents, siblings, children, grandchildren. Help them forgive you and help you all forgive yourselves. Please and thank you. Help you forgive your lovers, 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 spouses, spouses, lovers, parents, lovers. Help them forgive you and help you all forgive yourselves. Please and thank you. Your whole family and lineage. Help you forgive your cousins, aunts, uncles, step-in-laws, hidden, secret, foster, adopted, and all other significant people, beings, family members, relationships, role models, and authority figures. Help them forgive you and help you all forgive yourselves. Please and thank you, infinite creator, all that you truly are. Please and thank you for the highest good. Please lift out all weight, pain, burden, sin, debt, death, negativity, limitations, spells, hexes, curses, white magic, black magic, real or imagined, all superstition energy around any of it. Lift them into your heavens, transform it into your love, and let your love flow back into them, all of them, giving them complete peace now and forever. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. And just take a breath in and let it out and notice how that feels in the body.
That was very powerful.
Yeah.
It was very powerful. I think you covered everybody. Every connection. It reminded me as you were listening to the list, you know, you kind of like everybody that you could think of. It reminded me of a book that I heard as an audio book. I'm trying to remember who the author was. I think it would have been like a New Thought author, like Prentice Mulford or someone like that, you know. And but one of the things that it was a book about forgiveness, and there was a part of it about forgiveness and releasing, but it was saying just, you know, it would take, you know, take a few days or weeks to actually think about all the instances that have happened in your life that you're still holding a little bit of resentment for, and not necessarily just those big massive things of someone came in and broke your heart, but, you know, the person that kind of stuck their foot out and tripped you over in the playground at school when you were 5 years old and you think you've gotten over. It was going back to all of those things where you're just like, and didn't really allow it to be released. And that little bit that you know, that little resentment that you had held as a 5-year-old kid because someone tripped you over, just got tucked away somewhere and is still being carried through. And just hearing that list of, you know, that person, the spouse, foster parent, you know, all of those things just kind of brought to mind the making that list and then going through it and releasing that space. So yeah, it was beautiful. It's really, really powerful.
Yes, I love that description. So it's the weight that holds us down from having a higher energy resonance. You see, so when we do this work, it helps us awaken to a different kind of consciousness, a different perspective. It's almost like we come in with the gifts and the burdens of our ancestors. If we came in with glasses, we come in with clouded glasses, and when we do this work, the glass is clear, and we're like, oh, here I am, right? Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So I can't top that really. So before we close this and I say goodbye, please just share if there's anything upcoming that you want to share about, and also let everyone listening know where they can reach out to you and contact you if they want to work with you further.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Actually, I'd like to just let everybody know that at my website, Elizabeth-Kipp.com, you have to put a hyphen in between my first and last name. That's Kipp, K-I-P-P, Elizabeth-Kipp.com. Under the resources on my resources page, if you go down there, there's a free booklet of 10 ancestral clearing prayers that people might really be interested in. And of course, you can book a session with me anytime. I do private sessions, one-on-one, online, in person, on the phone, you know, whatever. And I do groups as well. So I'd be happy to come in if anybody's interested in doing group, which I can do again online, or I can come in person. So thank you. I'd just like to say in ending here that if I had one thing that I wanted everybody to remember when they left from me, is that the greatest healer in your life lives inside of you. right? Doctors can set a bone and stitch up a wound, and maybe they can give you a pill, but they can't tell the body how to heal. Only the body knows how to do that, right? So understanding that that's your source of power, that as we said, grace is always here, and it lives right in there as that intelligence in the body. And that was helpful for me in my healing journey to know that.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for contributing to this episode of Her Conversations, and thank you for listening. You can find out more about me on my website, carolmaewhittick.com, carolmaewhittick.com. You can still sign up for Embody Her, Embody Higher Energetic Resonance, 3 steps closer to being the woman of your dream. Take the free journey, use the link in the show notes. Also, if you feel called to work one-on-one with me with my spiritual life coaching, see the link in the show notes and reach out to me, and we'll have a talk and see if we're aligned to work together. If you want to connect on Facebook, look for Carol Mae Whittick and Kazmic, Kazmick, on Instagram. Also, do look out for Higher Energetic Resonance Inspirations. My solo episodes are all on that platform now. Every week I delve into a different subject and just uncover what it's teaching us, how we can learn and grow from that. The most recent episode that I did was all about resistance. Higher Energetic Resonance Inspirations. So until the next episode, have a great week. Take care.